It's one of those flavors that I never think, oh, I wanted to take.
Yeah, when you're trying to fall asleep.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, if I stood.
Thank you.
Yes, from there, okay, not really, people would go in and act like me, but I remember she would go when she, no reason, she would like, coffee. With the gross though, the slice of that quickness. No, it was just. She would cut.
All right.
I have to tell you, it's already.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe things.
Oh, yeah.
We need to take and whatever it is.
Yes.
Bunny rabbit.
That's a good thing. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started, but Rosemary and Stephanie, do we have any pastoral care updates?
Don't know, I don't have any.
Okay.
Daniel Pott had gotten out of the hospital and gone to advanced care rehab. And was there for about 3 days, I believe. And they had to take him back because he was having difficulty breathing and he is tested positive for COVID again. So, and COVID wasn't what took him to the hospital to begin with, but, so he's really struggling, so.
Probably caught COVID in the hospital.
Well, or, I mean, cause his whole family ended up with it, so did they catch it in the hospital? Like that's, you can get COVID at the grocery store now, you know, like. Going in and getting one thing.
Been in hospital.
Yes, yeah, so it's hard to say, but yeah, like prayers for him, prayers for his family, prayers for Aline. She is not getting to see him all that often. Because she had tested positive even though she was without symptoms. And because there's a lot of distance between them. And she's doing a lot of PT, which she's doing very well with, but that has been really important. So please keep them in prayer.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys. So this is weird. I'm teaching my essay. Guy pushed me to do this, and I'm excited to have readers and to talk to you about it. But it's awkward. I'm gonna get through my awkwardness and not try to be too self-fixed. But I wanted to start with a question, and it's a simple one, but it's where do you encounter God? Where are the places, the things, the people? Where do you encounter God?
Well, I've certainly had an encounter out, quote, in nature.
Yeah.
My family was camping out at Fall Creek Falls State Park in the mid 1960s as a trial run with one of those Nimrod trailers that got towed behind the family station wagon, and the things would slide out, pop up, and we were getting ready to do a big out west trip. So that was a trial run to see how that worked out.
How did it work out?
And so that worked out just fine. But we were at an established campsite in Fall Creek Falls State Park, and I saw a trailer. Well groomed and all, it sort of invited me to walk down. And after about 5 minutes, I came to a set of steps, logs placed on a slope to hold the soil above, and then formed a flight of steps. Went down there, and it came out on top of a big creek with a heavy flow of water. This was in the spring. And a significant waterfall. It was not the Fall Creek Falls itself, which is, I think, the tallest free fall of water in the eastern U.S. But this was still a very impressive stream, and I just had such a feeling of gratitude that nature could have such a wonderful, spectacular element to it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Where do you encounter God? What places, what people, what things, where do you encounter God?
I walk every day and, I enjoy being outside to walk. I don't wanna walk on the, treadmill or the tracks, the line. I want to be outside. And one of the reasons is that's my experience with that. The open sky, flowers, bunnies, just nature. I enjoy that. That's a big part of my life.
It's a good thing to do.
It's
Yeah, we'll follow up on your essay in nature, but animals and birds. I mean, now that I've retired, semi-retired, I have a lot more time to notice, be out in it, and it's God's creations, right?
Yeah.
And diverse.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Where else do you encounter God?
Anytime under a dark night sky.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, which we don't see.
My friend from seminary is a chaplain at the Asheville School in Asheville, and we met in the Smokies a couple weeks ago and canoe camped out on Lake Fontana in the Smokies. And the first night we were just like this, staring up at the sky for hours. So gorgeous when you're away from the city lights. Thanks again.
I also had moments though where I was thankful and impressed by and almost amazed by some of the theological concepts that we had studying Migliori's book.
Great.
I have a whole different kind of natural animal that I like. I find myself really sort of feeling overwhelmed even when I see strangers that are just doing those regular kind things that we kind of always expect them to do, but we don't really get to see all the time. So just out in the wild with people, when strangers are real good to each other, it really touches. It can touch really well.
That's awesome. Do y'all know who Thomas Merton is?
Yes,
Yeah.
Do y'all know about his epiphany at 4th and Walnut?
yes, sort of.
Yeah, so Thomas Merton's probably one of the most prominent spiritual writers of the 20th century. He was a Catholic monk.
Was he on the faculty at Columbia at the time?
No, this was way after that. So he had a pretty wild life. His autobiography when he first became a monk is called 7-Story Mountain, and it was a bestseller, kind of unexpectedly. But just a great writer and wrote on a lot of things, but predominantly in spirituality. And he was at the beginning, well, I think this was kind of midway through his career. He had an early death, but he was this he lived in a monastery in Gethsemane, Kentucky, and was very spiritual and very devoted to that. And one day he went into Louisville, in the downtown area, 4th and Walnut, that was the area. And I think he was eating in a cafe or something. He came out and he looked at all these people, and he'd been kind of judgmental when he first came into Louisville, right? You can imagine if you're living out in a small community in the woods, and then you come into Louisville, you'd be a little cranky. So he was a little cranky, he was pretty judgmental, and he walks out of the restaurant or wherever he was onto the street, and he sees all these people, and he said it was like they were all just like awash in God's love. And it just struck him and humbled him in a really helpful way for his own personal spirituality, to realize like all the stuff he was striving for and doing didn't make him any better than all these people and he was encountering, that God loved them just as much as they loved him. And there's actually a plaque at 4th of Walnut. If you Google Thomas Merton 4th of Walnut, his little writing about will pop up. But that you remind me. Any other places or people or things, ways that you encounter God?
I was struck by the lack of church on your list.
Oh yeah, I'm a bad pastor. Ken's gonna set me right. We're gonna put church up there so we don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Otherwise, my annual giving might be going to waste.
Maybe just go to Fall Creek Falls every day. Church is a great place. I think one of the places I most encounter God in church is when we sing hymns and all our raggedy voices come together and it sounds nice. Yeah. What else? Anything else?
Face of a child.
That's a great one.
I was gonna say, and those of you who know me won't be surprised, Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel.
I like to eat at Cracker Barrel alone because you meet strangers there. And a few weeks ago, I was sitting at a table and there was a big family at a round table in front of me. One little boy was a part of all these adults, and they finally brought the biscuits, and he stood up in his chair and he had a biscuit in his hand and he was just swaying back and forth, eating that biscuit. And I was looking at him and I was feeling a little bit down that day and I couldn't help but smile. And he looked at me and smiled back.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, this is, and then if that wasn't enough, when they left, he came by my table and said, hi.
That's awesome.
So, face of a child and Cracker Barrel, the two together.
There you go. Anything else? These are good things. I wanted to start with this because I think one of the things I'm trying to get at in my essay is I think spirituality is very much, and I think the gospel speaks to this as well, it's very much about opening ourselves to the world. And God's constantly pulling us out of ourselves. Our tendency, and in this day and age, I think it's almost overwhelmed because of social media and the way we can kind of insulate ourselves from others or just kind of stay within our bubbles. But I think the gospel, that's one of the central messages. If you think about the stories that Christ is sharing, it's people that are on the periphery of those that are on the inside. And who's Christ always bumping heads with? It's the religious establishment, right? And so Christ isn't trying to get rid of the religious establishment. Christ isn't trying to overturn the law. I think what Christ is trying to say, though, is that our faith, our beliefs should push us outward. And the circle of who's in and who's out should always be expanding. So you think about the woman at the well, you think about the Good Samaritan, you think about the lepers, all of these, the tax collectors, all of these people would be considered people that are on the fringe and that it would be improper to speak to. And Christ is just constantly drawing us out. And I think one thing that we see from here is nature. The world around us is also a place that draws us out of ourselves and realizes the depth and the extent of who God is and God's love. And so I wanted to start with that because I think in many ways that's all the essay is about opening to the world around us, and that opening being the chance to encounter God in even more profound depth. So I'm going to walk through this essay. I've got a lot of photos. And I want you to stop me, yell at me if you have questions, even if it's not directly related. But I wanted to start with two poems that I think kind of tie into this idea of encountering God. So are y'all familiar with Gerard Manley Hopkins? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I see mostly yes, but some no's. He was a Jesuit priest in the Victorian era and is considered the connecting piece between Victorian poetry and modern poetry. And so he's kind of breaking from the Victorian kind of forms and meter and all that kind of stuff and opening the door to what will become modern poetry. His poetry is explicitly religious throughout. I mean, he was a Jesuit priest. He was also someone that really struggled with his call as an artist, and sometimes feeling that conflicted with his call as a man of God, as a priest. And so there was a lot of turmoil around that. He also was English and got stationed in Ireland and went into a deep, deep depression. And so some of his poems, not the ones we're reading today, really wrestle with doubt in the context of someone of deep, deep faith. They're trying to make sense of that. Yes.
I'm sorry, what year did you say he lived? It doesn't matter.
I want to say it's the end of the 1800s.
Oh, okay.
But I'm terrible with dates. I don't even know when I was born.
That's curious about that.
Let's see. Yes, I was right.
Whoa.
He died in 1889.
Okay.
And he was, I'm trying to see, he was 44 when he passed away. So he was born in 18.
I was just trying to place the time of when he was saying what he was saying.
Yeah. He is an incredible poet if you haven't read him before. And especially if you like devotional poetry or poetry that's theological themes, just incredible. Yes?
And this just may be how it came off, but was there the suggestion that where he was placed was difficult for him?
Oh yeah, he speaks about that
Okay.
in letters. He has a series of poems. I'll probably at some point teach a class on it called the Terrible Sonnets. And they're a group of 6 sonnets that are him dealing with this despair, this crisis of faith, and a lot of it is wrapped up in being away from him. Okay, but we're going to read his happy poems today. So the first is God's Grandeur, and I'll read this one, and then if someone's brave, they can read the next one. Okay, God's Grandeur. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod. And all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things. And though the last light of the black west wind, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with awe fragrance. Y'all familiar with this poem?
I had to study it as a senior at Indiana.
Yeah.
1966.
It's a beautiful poem that speaks about the power of creation and just the kind of boundlessness of it, even in spite of humanity's growing disconnection from the world. And I think too speaks to, like we were talking about, the way that God speaks to us through the world, that creation is a revelation in many ways of God and God's love and depth. Anything stick out to y'all? Gerard Manley Hopkins is known for being stress heavy. So for those of you that are poets will know this, but if you're not, there's unstressed, which when you're speaking, it's kind of like a lower point, and then stressed is when you would like almost raise your voice. And so when you read a poem, when you think about meter, right? Dun, 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 that's the stress. And so Gerard Manley Hopkins' poems have tons of stress. So if you heard when I was reading it, it's a very dun, 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 instead of like a bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. But what stuck out to you? Anything?
Very visual.
Yes.
Very visual.
Extremely visual.
Nature is never spent.
Yes. Yeah. What else?
Charged, is it like charged, like kind of like electrically or with energy, or is it charged with a duty? Sort of.
Well, I think, poetry is something that's open to multiple interpretations, and I think even beyond the author's intent. So what would you read?
Both.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it too. A good reading.
That didn't occur to me. That's good.
It's a great reading. What else?
Well, how man can impact nature.
Yeah.
And nature still exists.
Yeah,
Still great.
you're seeing someone that's at the epicenter of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
And it's not like just casting that as bad, but it is wrestling with this disconnect he feels with the natural world, as there's this huge societal shift in the connection.
Well, you push back on what Mark just said. Is man able to feel it with this foot big shot?
Well, I think that's part of the question that arises from this is what is our connection, and is it part of our nature to be disconnected? You know, people wrestle with that question forever. And another thing to think about too is it varies for different groups, for different periods of time. Even within this community, I'm sure there's some of us that love going out hiking and some of us that hate bugs and love air conditioning.
It's always, kind of like it's always there. It's almost like our relationship with God. I mean, God's always there. We're the ones that sort of walk away.
Yes.
Take for granted, disregard. And I took my grandson out to Percy Warren this week. The nature center. He's 3 years old. We're just walking around. Took a little bag and he starts picking up leaves. And I go, man, that is an amazing leaf. And he said, what's this, Poppy? And it's a little crab. It's like, and I told him about the seasons and fall. And I was like, it's there.
Yeah.
I just choose to. And it was like an incredibly powerful afternoon to spend with him. And it's always present. It's always there. It's always available. I can do it right now. But we stay in the air conditioning or we get on our social media.
You see this in the Psalms too a lot. The psalmist is reminding himself of the times that God is present as a way to kind of almost shake himself up and say, God is still here. I just need to be reminded of that. And it's like you're saying, you know, nature's out there.
Yeah.
When we go out there though, it kind of reminds us when we wake back up to it. Anything else on this poem?
Right. To me, the emphasis in the first paragraph
Stanza.
yes, is what men or humans do to nature. But I was thinking of all the forest fires we've been having, and some of them are not intentionally set. I mean, a lightning strike because of our, so nature can impact nature, destroy it all, but there's always some little green growing back.
Yeah. Well, in Florida, we have to light fires.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was a history of wildlife management of preventing forest fires. You mean Smokey the Bear, obviously. But in Florida, lightning strikes striking the landscapes with a part and parcel of a healthy ecosystem. And so now they have controlled burns in areas that have like palmettos and pine flats. They try to burn those every 3 to 7 years. So it's interesting the way that sometimes the things we take in certain areas. All right, we have any brave souls that want to read the next poem?
John is getting funny school.
Yeah.
What your big one?
Look down, yeah.
Everybody's.
What are the accents?
The accents are for parts that should be stressed that aren't typically stressed. So,
So why don't you maybe take a feeling for it?
well, you know, the tendency when I read Hopkins is to try to read really fast. That stress is almost like a rollicking. But you'll just get tripped up because it's hard to read. I'll read it unless anyone else wants to. No brave souls? Okay, this next one is called As Kingfishers Catch Fire. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. Tumbled over rim and roundy wells, stones ring. Like each touch spring tells, each hung bell's bow, swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Feels out that being indoors, each one dwells, selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that a king. I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eyes what in God's eyes he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs, lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the feature of men's faces. This one's a little more confusing, huh?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what this says, but I hear a lot of the same sounds, the bells, a lot of the words have an oral appeal.
Yeah, I mean, that's the stress heavy element that he's doing is he's trying to make it mimic speech in the sense that when we're talking to each other, we're enunciating the word and not just kind of the blah, 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 blah. And so you can't read his without kind of articulating it. So what this poem is largely about is that God has created each and everything with an intent and a purpose. And when we live that intent and purpose out, we are living in the way that God intends, and it's a beautiful, rich thing. So as kingfishers catch fire, who here has seen a kingfisher?
Yeah, but I never saw one on fire.
Well, he's talking about the iridescence of their feathers, so the brightness of their feathers, right? So we're in poetry world, right? We're not in literal world. Dragonflies draw flames. So if you see a dragonfly in the sunlight, they can kind of glimmer too. Yeah. And so this is the eye being drawn to the uniqueness of these two creatures. And it's not only creatures, it could just be a stone. So think about a stone being thrown over a well and the noise it makes when it hits the rim and then bounces and falls and then splash. That's what a stone is. And then a tucked string, a hung bell, you're hearing, right? Now we're moving to noise. So we were in sight and now we're in hearing, right? Audible. And then we move to a kind of description when he says each mortal thing does one thing in the same. So everything is called to this. Deals out that being indoors, each one dwells, self. So this is extremely kind of convoluted, but it's that last line in the stanza, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. God has created each of us with a purpose, a mission, a thing to do, a thing to be. So just as the kingfisher flies and it's iridescent, looks like a flame, or fire, and the dragonfly looks like a flame, or a thrown stone has that particular sound, we are called to do that. And what are we called to do? We are called to the things that we read about in scripture, that we hear about in church, right? Justice, grace, acts in God's eye, what God's eye he is, the image of God, right? And that is personified, typified, embodied in who? Christ, right? So that's what the poem ends with. And Christ, who we are called to imitate, to follow, to live in, there's this beautiful ending, right? For Christ plays 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the feature of men's faces. So Christ is in all of us. Christ is playing in all of us. There's something joyful here. This is not a sad or serious or formal thing. This is Christ is in you, Christ is alive. And so we read in these two poems this idea that the world is charged with God and God is all around us. And also God is in us. God is Christ acting through us. But the point is we have to choose these things, right? That like Mark was saying, nature's there, but we have to choose to go out there and to experience it and open ourselves. Bob had to choose to go down that path to the waterfall. Ken had to choose to look up into the night sky. And likewise, we have to choose to live out our faith. We have to choose to not curse at the person that cut us off in traffic, to stop and say, you know what, I need to call a friend who's been going through a hard time, even if it feels awkward or something you don't want to do. Saying hi to someone in church and welcoming them at their new face. that's the choice we're making. When we do that, the body of Christ is alive in our limbs and in our faces. Any other things stick out in this poem or questions about it?
When you say it that way, and interpret it, it's an uplifting, and it makes you feel like you're relevant. Like
Yeah.
that. It's got it easy. In today's world, it gotta go. You know, just hanging on.
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of our faith, and this was something I really wanted to highlight in this essay that I wrote, is we have to be intentional about it. It doesn't just come to us. Right? We have to chase it, you know?
Unlike the Fisher King and the Stones.
Yeah.
They're created to show God in what they are.
Right.
In a way that they don't have to interact with, they just are.
Yep.
But we have that different relationship.
Yes. And you know, as someone that's been in ministry for a while, I hear people all the time saying, I just don't really feel faith. You know, I feel kind of like I'm it's not there, or I don't feel it in the way I want to feel it. And I think a lot of us grow up in the church or just during communities of faith, and it's almost like it's just implied that you have faith. But I hope reading through this essay and through our conversation today, you can see that faith is something that we do. And sometimes we need to do it more than others. Sometimes it comes easy to us, and sometimes we have to work for it. But that relationship is like all relationships, right? You didn't meet your spouse, your partner, and just marry them. You had to work toward it. You had to have a courtship and figure out if it works or not, see if you're a good fit. It's the same thing with God, right? We pray, come to church, we read scripture, we have conversations with each other. All of those things are feeding that and giving it more strength and fire. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
We're gonna move to the essay now. So I'm gonna just walk through the essay. Do y'all have it? Does anyone need a copy? Okay, and I'm just gonna talk about this. Y'all stop and ask questions, and I'll kind of talk about the various sections and what's going on. And I've got some photos for you too.
It's an illustrated essay, right? You got photographs?
Yes, yeah, I've got lots of photographs to share.
Yeah, the first question I have is, did you sit down and write this at one time, or was this several writings that finally came together?
So this started as a poem in 2014. And it was just a couple of lines, and I worked on it for 3 years. And then one day I said, this poem is not a poem, it's an essay. And so I worked on it for another 2 years. So it was a long time coming. It was probably over 5 years until it took shape. And even then it wasn't fully finished, but it literally started with moving back home from seminary and encountering great egrets again. I'd see them very occasionally in New Jersey, but in Florida, they're all over the place. You'll just see them up in the sky, just all over. And I just was captivated with it in this way where it was like, I couldn't capture why I was captivated, like what was going on. And that's how the poem started, and it eventually became an essay. And that essay I sent to a bunch of places, and I got a bunch of replies that this is a great essay, but we're not going to take it. So it got rejected all over the place. And then the North American Review published it last summer. So it was almost 10 years from when I first started that poem. And then I just found out a couple of weeks ago that it's going to be included in the best spiritual literature anthology. Wow. So it gets a second life this December, which is great.
So what was the initial encounter? Was it when you were at the Audubon Society place in the Everglades?
Oh, I mean, I've seen these birds forever. I think I've always kind of been it's weird. I've seen them a lot, but it was when I came back from seminary that they just spoke to me in some strange way.
So is that when you're canoeing through the mangrove?
Yeah, that was a pretty impactful. That was the first one. And so I'll start, we can start. Yeah, Ken?
This is sort of a question. Are there any egrets that aren't so great or how?
There's
He says that they're in a island that's different from the smaller.
there are plenty of egrets that are not great. I don't know if there's bad egrets, but there are egrets that aren't great. There's lots of little cattle egret and green egrets. There's all kinds of different egrets.
Okay, thank you.
So
Egretta is the smaller egrets, right?
yeah. So the great egret's actually in the heron phylum or genera. So this is Florida. This is a very bad drawing of Florida. And this is where Tampa is. And so now we're looking at Tampa on this map. And you see this little thing right here? This little dot, that's Weeden Island, and Masters Bayou is on the north side of Weeden Island. So if you're in Tampa and you cross the bridge into St. Pete, downtown St. Pete's right here, this is Weeden Island, and Masters Bayou, where I open, is right here. Masters Bayou, Weeden Island is just this place that you go kayak through, and you feel like you're a million miles away from civilization when you're literally surrounded. So this is mangroves. So how many of y'all have been in a mangrove forest? All right, good. Everyone should be, that should be on your bucket list. But this is at Weeden Island and Masters Bayou, there's all these tunnels, and you can kayak miles and miles. And so this is one of the ones that's on the south side of Weeden Island. But this actual tunnel goes for like over a mile straight, and then it winds for miles. It's just beautiful. Yes.
We went kayaking down in the Everglades.
Oh, okay.
I was wondering what makes these canals, why do you have a tunnel that goes on? Is that because of the water level or the stream that keeps the plants from coming in?
So there's a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it could be like there's an oyster mound, and then a mangrove pod. They have these seed pods that just float around. And sometimes the seed pod will hit one of those mangrove mounds, and then just slowly it'll become a forest.
So the water channel makes the tunnel.
Well, the water channel makes the tunnel here, but the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers makes them too. So they dug out a ton around this area, trying to get fish more inland because they thought it would control mosquitoes. This was back in the 40s and 50s. And so a lot of these tunnels are actually man-made. Not all of them, but some of them. But yeah, the channels, if it's too deep and the roots can't get down, if there's like a natural high point, which could be an oyster mound, there's all kinds of different reasons. If there's like a little swell or something, but a lot of the ones in this area actually are man-made. So, this essay starts with me going through a passage like this, a little mangrove tunnel, and I've just gotten back from seminary. I'm with my friend, and we come around the corner of this tunnel that's not a tunnel people go through. We kind of worked our way into it, and I just see this egret. It spreads its wings out, and it was just like one of these images I couldn't shake from. And that's in many ways what kind of prompted me to start writing down these lines that became this essay. So let's look at some pictures.
You still have the canoe?
I sold it when I moved up here. I had 3 kayaks and 1 canoe, and I came up here with 1 kayak. But I now have 2 kayaks. I can't help myself. Yeah, I wanted to bring the canoe up, but
We only one roof on your car.
well, yeah, and when we moved, we were just like, we already had too much stuff, it felt like, so. So these are egrets. They're gorgeous, all white birds. They are they're pretty much everywhere except Antarctica. And they're more prominent in wetland areas and coastal areas. And you know, they're 3 feet tall usually, but their wings can go about 6 feet. And so when you see one in flight right near you, they're giant birds. They're not like heavy, but just so big. Here's another one. You can see it has its breeding plumes off the back.
And the green, that was the lime green we were talking about.
Yeah, well, I've got another picture of that, but that's called the lore, that area of their eye, and it actually turns green when they're breeding. But you can see in this one, well, not as well, but you can see it's just not as prominent.
Male or female?
That would be a female.
Do you call it breeding, Lou?
Breeding.
Breeding. Yeah, so these are called aigrettes, AIGRETTES. And aigrettes are only around during the breeding season. And then here's another one, feeding. And so you can see that S in its neck I was talking about. And they'll do that when they're flying more compacted. Their necks are so long. And what they'll do when they're hunting is they'll sit just over the water. And then they'll wait for a fish to come under it. And then just like quick as lightning, it'll stab it. It's really incredible.
But then they have to sort of straighten out.
To get it down, yeah. So they'll put their head up and kind of work it down. Yeah. So I did an undergrad degree in horticulture at University of Florida, and when I was done, I went to I got accepted to go to University of Kentucky for a forestry master's program. But I did a 6-month internship at the Audubon Society's Corkscrew Swamp. The Corkscrew Swamp is in Naples. Well, so Naples is like right here, and Corkscrew Swamp is like right here. It's in the dead center of the state, and it's on the north side. It's like the uppermost part of the Everglades. So most people think of Everglades as the tip of Florida, but it actually starts under Lake Kissimmee, which is a big lake. Well, there's Okeechobee and Kissimmee, but it kind of starts way farther north than most people think. And what they have out there is a boardwalk that's 2.25 miles, and it goes through pine flats, prairie, marsh, and swamp. And so you get essentially 4 ecosystems in one little walk. And it is one of the premier birding sites in North America. People fly from all over the world to come there just to look at birds. I worked in the backcountry most of the time. I did resource management, but occasionally I would work on the boardwalk, and you would see people with these shining lenses for their cameras that were like, you know, $30,000-$40,000 equipment.
This is the place close to Naples.
Yes, it's 20 minutes.
I've been there.
Oh,
I sit there listening to.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's it called again?
Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Corkscrew Swamp is like a creek that was named after it. And it's also the largest stand of bald cypress, like oldest bald cypress. So obviously bald cypress throughout the country has been harvested a lot, but the stand here is one of the oldest in the country. And there's a lot of Florida panthers here. It's a really well-known area for panther sightings. Some of the people I worked with saw one when I was working there. Unfortunately, I didn't see it. There's lots of black bears. So a lot of people see black bears and a whole host of other wildlife. But it's really a gorgeous place. And if you're ever down there, it's worth seeing. Here's another. So this is, you have cypress swamp on the right side, and this is prairie marsh here on the left. So this is not as wet, but it's kind of like a prairie, but still marshy. And then
That's a freshwater.
yes. So this is in the center of the state. So Naples is on the coast, and this is in state near Immokalee. And then beautiful swamp. This is what it looks like when you get into the cypress swamp. You can see some of the cypress trees in the back, and there's little ponds and wet areas. So when I was at Corkscrew, I had tons of time to just move around and explore, and a lot of these ponds in the wintertime, they'll get really tiny, and parts of the summer too. And so you can go to one of these ponds at times, there'll be otters, raccoons, spoonbills, egrets, wood storks. I mean, just all the kind of bird life you could think in these tiny little concentrated areas. And so it was a really neat opportunity to get close and intimate with a lot of these animals. And lots of gators too. I got chased by 2 different gators while I was there. And in 6 months, I probably saw 700 gators. The back part of the property has a long road that goes for about 2 miles. And there's irrigation ditches that run around it that used to be used for agriculture. And Audubon bought that land and turned it into the society, to the sanctuary, but the canals are still there. And I am not lying, you could drive down that 1.5-mile stretch of road and probably see like 70 gators. And I would walk by them all the time. You almost get so familiar with them, you're not even worried about them. And they're much more hesitant. I always tell people, be afraid of the gator you see at a golf course and not the one you see in the middle of the woods. Because the ones in the golf course are used to humans. But when we would encounter them, they would typically run from us. The 2 times I got chased, I was in a boat, in a John boat, cleaning out a pond that had invasive weeds. And I accidentally kind of paddled up next to some baby gators, and their mom came flying across the pond and boomed into my boat. And I was right off the boardwalk, and there's all these people watching me. I'm like, I'm gonna fall in the water and die in front of all these people. Thankfully, I didn't. And then the second time, my boss, who is the manager of the sanctuary, we're driving down a road, and there was a split, and we see, I'm not lying, like a 14-foot gator walking. So we get out and we go run up to it. And the canal is right there, the irrigation canal. We didn't know this at the time, but it was completely dry. So we thought it was just going to run away from us and dive in. Instead, it ran after us. And so it's the only time in my life where I was legitimately chased by a gator. And so we ran like heck. And thankfully, it just kind of bluffed us. So it just charged us for like 10 yards and then it stopped.
I've spent a lot of time in Hilton Head. And I stayed on one of the lagoons. And I was close to the water, and I could see a really, really big one coming down the lagoon, and he could see me. He got even with me. He rotated his body and started moving out of the water. He roared at me.
Oh, wow.
I made it back up the hill. So,
when was that?
Where?
Like what time of the year?
It would have been in May.
It might have been a female and it had eggs.
I got back, I wasn't that far from the condo where we were staying. It was this old fashioned sliding door. It didn't have a handle, but it had an indentation, and my fingers kept slipping out of the indentation. I was trying to get the door open, but it never came all the way out of the water.
Yeah, they usually get really territorial when they're breeding. Ken?
Did you see God in that moment?
I saw something, but I'm gonna go. Yeah, Mark.
I've always heard if you get chased by a gator, run it a zigzag as opposed to straight.
Yeah. So we ran zigzag.
Yeah.
They have a spine that doesn't allow them to curve like a snake, and so when they run, they have to literally turn their whole body.
Yeah.
And so you do run.
Good enough.
Yeah. We were running zigzag and screaming for fans. That helps too.
Did you mention their clicking? As I used to go with 8th graders to a trip to the Okefenokee Swamp. And there would be several really large gators just out sunning themselves. And the warning was if they start clicking.
Oh yeah, it's like almost like a church.
Area.
Yeah, they'll do that around their little gators too. I ended up in a dugout canoe that a family friend bought. He was out in the Pacific and he ran into some indigenous people in a dugout canoe, bought it, brought it back to Florida, and I was in it with another family friend in Jacksonville, paddling past gators. And this canoe that wasn't straight, it was literally a palm tree that someone had dug out. and we almost flipped over, and it was doing that clicking. Oh, I can tell you gator stories all day. So speaking of, one of the things I talk about is in college, when I was headed to go party, I pulled off at a gator farm. And a guy handed me a baby gator and it just shook me to life. And so this is the other thing in the essay. That's like when I saw the egret in that tunnel, it was like everything else kind of faded away. And I was just brought into this moment. And so this is not me, but this is what it was like holding a little baby gator. It's just these animals that have been around for millions of years. And you think about the history that has been encompassed in that time period and what they've not seen personally, but like almost as a species. And so it shook me with this kind of awareness, a depth that was so bigger and grander than mine. It's like when you hear astronauts talking about being in outer space and looking at Earth. It was something like that. It's just
So
really
there's a gator that small, is it like no?
Oh, they have sharp teeth, but they're not strong enough to do any damage, but they're very sharp. I've woken up.
Playful like kittens or?
No. They're not that cute, but I've woken up, one time I was sick and I woke up and a friend of mine had come over and he put a baby gator on my chest when I was sleeping. I didn't have a profound experience.
One of the things I love that you said on page 98, you were talking about the birds and them having that connection to dinosaurs. It's the middle paragraph in the right-hand column toward the end where you said, you know, the bird carries something beyond its own history, something beyond history. I thought that was really.
Yeah, that's just something I just was like profoundly struck by, studying these birds that are related to dinosaurs or gators, these creatures that have been around so long. It's like they carry something within them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I sense it. Seeing these animals, you like have time collapses in their presence.
Yeah.
About their evolutionary path.
Yeah. I think that and this is what I was getting at with the Gospels, it was in a much more like human to human way, but I think God opens us up to these realities. They're so much deeper than the kind of stuff we're just caught in our day-to-day life. We've got bills to pay, we've got friends that are sick, we've just got things to do. But there are moments in our lives when we are struck. And in those moments, it's like we just have a deeper appreciation of life or a more profound understanding of things. And that's what I was trying to capture in this. And those moments, I think, are things that we can, sometimes it just happens by chance, but I do think we can try to open ourselves. So birds are dinosaurs, right? That's where they come from. And this is kind of like mind-bafflingly the group that a lot of birds come from. There's theropods, and they're hollow bone. And so being hollow bone, that's what eventually led them to fly, is because they didn't have the weight that most animals have with having not hollow bones. And so one of the things I'm trying to wrestle with this is like the appreciation for the sciences and evolution and history, but also just the kind of like spiritual reality of encountering animals or thinking about just how long the earth has been around. And I think that's something that we can hold, and it doesn't have to be intention. We can we can have a spiritual experience thinking about dinosaurs, and at the same time, just think about evolution and the history and archaeology and geography that's brought it to us too. All right, so let's go to your handout. We're going to take a break real quick because I just wanted to talk about epictesis, which is kind of the spiritual theme of this essay. So if you have your handout, does everyone have a handout? So on the third page after those two poems, this Greek word epictesis actually appears in Philippians 3. Stephanie, would you read that?
Beloved, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but this one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on towards the goal for the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. Let those of us then who are mature be of the same mind. And if you think differently about anything, this too God will reveal to you.
So that part in bold is the Greek word epektasis, the straining forward, the straining towards God. It encompasses an active seeking after God, but also that kind of desire. Have y'all ever heard, I quote this all the time, but St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in you, speaking about God. And it's that idea that we have all these desires within us, but it's ultimately God when we feel that that desire has been met. And so that desire can be put onto a bunch of different things, but it never really feels fulfilled until it's resting in God. So this next quote is from a Dominican, I think he's a Dominican priest, who's a professor, but also has written some beautiful books on contemplation and centering prayer, named Martin Laird. He's talking about epektasis, but he's using the term epectasy, which is another kind of version of it. The term epectasy was coined by John Danielou to highlight Gregory of Nyssa's way of describing how desire for God is not ended by the experience of God, but expands in perpetual self-forgetfulness and longs for God ever more deeply. So this idea is that God is infinite and boundless. And so our desire for God is never satisfied. And so when we have these moments where we encounter God, it's not the kind of feeling of being satiated when you're hungry, but of being even more hungry. And so the kind of idea here is that we never stop having that desire for God, not in this life or the next. It's just this continual drive towards God, because we are finite beings with a deep desire for the infinite. And because of that, we can never be filled, but our desire can grow, our love can grow. And so I always think about it like in the tornado, right? As a tornado is moving up, like you can think about like a spiral, maybe not a tornado. The spiral is opening toward the world around it and growing toward all these things and moving towards God. And it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider in that encounter with God. And it's horizontal as well, right? All those things we wrote in the beginning as well.
You taught Gregory Nitsa last fall in the Sunday school class.
We mentioned him, but I don't think we read any of his stuff. Oh, in Sunday school. No, I did not. Yeah, we did Benedict of nursery.
A little bit of it.
Yeah. So John Danielou was the first person to kind of pick this term out of Gregory of Nyssa, who's an early church father, and this is his words about it. So it is with all others in whom the desire for God is deeply embedded. They never cease to desire, but every enjoyment of God may turn into kindling of a still more intense desire. Even now, the soul united to God never has its fill of enjoyment. The more it enjoys, the more its desire for God increases. I just think this is a beautiful way to talk about our spiritual life. That we yearn for God, we encounter God, and our yearning grows even more. And so I'll end with this passage from Gregory of Nyssa. Bob, would you read that bottom one?
Then the word starts to draw her to participate in a higher view, as if she had never tasted it. Thus, as she progresses, her desire grows with each step. And because there is always an unlimited good beyond what the bride has attained, she always seems to be just at the beginning of her ascent.
Yes. So Gregory of Nyssa, the early church father, very instrumental in coming up with Trinitarian doctrine.
What does he know about brides?
Well, a lot of the early guys were married.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is a sermon on the Song of Songs, and so you know the Song of Songs is the bride and the groom speaking to each other, and a lot of people have read into that. It's a kind of spiritual metaphor for the person of faith's desire for God. And so it's very erotic imagery if you've read Song of Songs, but a lot of people have interpreted it in a spiritual way. And so Gregory of Nyssa is applying this idea of epektasis or epektasy to that. It's this idea that chasing after someone you deeply love, getting to know them deepens that love. And you can say that's even more magnified in our relationship with God. Any question? Yeah, Mark.
Question, is it so, you're saying spiritual? Is this kind of the Holy Spirit? I mean, is that what's at work here when you're?
I would say it's however you're encountering God in that moment.
Yeah.
You know, as people that believe in the Trinity, we use the language of Holy Spirit or God the Father or God and of Christ. And so it can be in different ways. You know, that first poem we read talked about the Holy Spirit bent over the world. And the second one talked about Christ. So I would say yes and. The idea here is that the thing I'm trying to push here is this idea that the world is just full of wonder and grandeur, and our spiritual life doesn't have to be a serious thing. It can be a thing that we enjoy and that enlivens us, and deepens our desire for God, in even more ways, right? It's like it's pushing us. So, you know, this fossil can make me have a deeper spiritual experience, a deeper relationship with God and with others. And that might seem weird or strange, but I think that's the whole point of this essay. Are we good with epektasis before I move on? So this is such a weird story. This is one of the most complete fossil finds of all times. And it's also one of the most unique fossil finds of all time because it is literally a winged dinosaur. And they found it, and it has the head, the wings, the front, back legs, everything's in place. This is such a unique thing. It's like a 1 in a trillion find. And this guy was just walking in his field, a farmer, and he sees something sticking out of the ground. And he thought it was like a limestone rock, and he starts pulling at it, and it's this. And he didn't want it, so he sold it to his friend for a cow. Think about like the most priceless fossil artifact. This is literally one of the premier fossils, and this is its story. So it ends up, after being sold for a cow, it ends up in an inn. So you're just having a beer, and this is hanging on the wall. Eventually, someone finds out about it. It's purchased. An industrialist helps purchase it for a museum where it is today. And it's the
Siemens.
Yeah, Simmons got it, and it's in the Berlin Natural History Museum. It is such a unique fossil. It is. You could read, there's books just on this fossil, how important it is, but this is how we know that birds came from dinosaurs, and that it was like they got smaller and smaller, they were hollow boned, and they eventually had wings and feathers, and those feathers eventually covered the body, and over time, this didn't happen overnight, right? This is hundreds of years. They became so light and so covered with feathers that they took flight.
So you can see the little striations in the wings?
Yeah, that's what you're seeing off the sides. Isn't that incredible? This is, I can't travel internationally right now because of dialysis, but when I can, this is something I would really want to see in person. And so when I was writing this essay and I was looking at all these different things, I was just struck with this like the crazy story of them finding this, but also this idea that there is one bird that was the first bird to take flight. Isn't that insane to think about? Think about being that first animal that awkwardly just started flapping its wings and running and then just took off. And then, you know, thousands and thousands, millions of years later now, there's just birds everywhere. It's something, you know, normal.
Do you think God laughed when the bird first?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, that was I imagine God laughing. The first bird, clumsy as its shape, body slathered in vibrant, awkward feathers, runs and jumps only to soar into a hard crash, its bill diving deep into Jurassic Earth. But this is Ergo, and it contains a future and sets out again as God's laughter reverberates. So again, but this time the jump becomes a glide, then a push down with clawed wings, the creature moving upward, the lift streaming stomach, DNA imprinting something that would be so simple for a great egret millions of years later. It must have been sunset. The small raven-like dinosaur bird's body is silhouette against the reddish-orange dust, floating momentarily over primeval forests that never knew axe, the giant deep green leaves. Yeah, such a wild thing to think about.
And somehow these survived the extinction event for dinosaurs.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Because they could fly.
I would assume so. I don't know the history. Obviously, there are other species that survived, but the large dinosaurs did not. But yes, I'm assuming flight had something to do with it. Yes, Kenny.
You think the first bird that flies flew was male or female?
Are you trying to start a war here? I'm gonna move past that one. All right, I want to make sure that we get through this, so I'm gonna speed it up. I'm having too much fun. So this is the lore. And you can see right there, it is incredible to see in person, but it is literally this bright green, lime green color.
And when it fades out, is it white?
No, it's like a darker green or black color. So at one point I talk about being in a swamp pond and listening to the egret's call. So this is at Corkscrew Swamp, one of their swamp ponds that's not on the main. And so you can see here, there's like what they would call a cypress dome. That's where there's like a stand of cypress in the middle of a swamp. And then you have the swamp pond, and then off the back is just essentially just hundreds of yards of wetland. And here is an actual, the inside of a cypress swamp. It's just incredible. You can see the boardwalk that I was talking about. Do y'all see that? It's really a unique place, and the boardwalk just goes all the way through it. When I was working there, the manager that worked there grew up in that area and was hired as a teenager to put up the boardwalk. And you know, decades later came and ran the place. So I'm tying all these different things together. We skipped over some things, but I'm moving now toward the end. And it gets into this, I'm kind of bringing it to our relationship to the world and the bad side of it. So I talked about my own personal history as a bored teenager just shooting animals for target practice, and how that's something I live with and wrestle with. I'm not against hunting, but this was just literally just shooting animals for no reason, like bloodlust, just stupid childhood stuff. But we see this happens too in the Victorian area, in New York and Paris and London and all these cosmopolitan areas. This was a very big trend at the time, and it's incredible to think about. But like, they would have a bird on their head and the plumes, and this was, you know, an egret. These breeding plumes. So these aren't the actual feathers. These are the breeding feathers most of the time. Some of them, like, have y'all ever seen a spoonbill, roseate spoonbill? They're pink. They would actually just kill the bird for those feathers, but a lot of times those for the breeding plumes, these really delicate egrets. These egrets were at one point worth, you know, double their weight in gold. They're extremely valuable. Here's another one. You can see the bird face on this bird. And this is like the highest of high society. So obviously, I'm pointing toward the women wearing it, but it's the men that killed them. And this is, you know, all these birds were just killed in one hunt. And it's strictly not even for all of their feathers, but the breeding feathers. And then here's a guy, that's I think a night heron. And that's a guy out in that room. So this is going on. This is as in many ways, this is how the conservation movement in the United States got started, because the numbers of birds being killed, I mentioned this French guy, Jean Chevalier, killed 1,000 egrets in one day. And these people were doing this all the time. And so in the Everglades, the numbers had decimated to such a point that they were worried that all of these wading birds are egrets and herons, were going to go extinct. And so there was this big movement to outlaw hunting for plumes, not hunting, but just for plumes. And so the first game warden in the United States was this guy, Guy Bradley. And he, as a child, grew up leading hunts. He was from Chicago, but he moved to the Everglades when he was young. And so as a teenager, he would guide the hunts, and he actually guided Jean Chevalier at one time. But he grew tired with it. And as the laws were getting enacted, he became the first game warden in the United States. And he lived out in the middle of nowhere and would track hundreds of miles each week trying to stop this. And it was still, people were still selling it. There was like a black market for it. And he actually, I don't mention this in the essay, but he was actually murdered 3 years into being a game warden. It was an extremely dangerous way to earn a living. Yes?
Was there ever any effort to trap the birds and hit their feathers and let them go? That was more trouble than that.
To trap them?
Trap.
Oh, yeah, no. I think this was just sheer power, you just shoot a bunch of them. They could have probably trapped them, but they couldn't have got them in the numbers they got when they shot them. And I mean, I get into the graphic elements of this in the story, but like, this is during the breeding season, so there's lots of eggs being left behind or even babies. It's just a really graphic, horrible thing. So yes.
There's several different other examples of culture doing this. Well, some bison, just wiping out the bison population to have rugs. Beaver hats, where all the voyagers would go in and trap beavers so men could wear these tall hats. We have to watch what we're doing periodically.
I always say, God has given us this world so that all may live with the abundance of creation. And it's not like creation isn't there for us to utilize and to interact with and to be fed from. I mean, that's what Psalm 104 is about. It's just like, what's the extent of that? God has drawn limits, and we shouldn't exceed those limits. And those limits allow creation to flourish, and we exceed it, and we see all the bad and ill. I talk at one point about ecstasy. And ecstasy is this experience of like being out of your body. I don't know if anyone's had an experience like that, but it's like you're almost so overwhelmed. But the other term that I talk about, and this is one I developed, is one's called entostatic or entostasy. And that's when you feel like seeing the egret draws you deeper into relationship with the world, or holding the baby gator. And I wanted to have something that was like that ecstatic experience, but not feeling drawn out of the world, but feeling drawn into the world. And so I kind of tie that in throughout the story, but I see Guy Bradley as someone that's trying to live this out, like someone that killed birds and their life was just filled with all this just death and murder, killing of all these animals and selling them for, a couple feathers. And at the end of his life, he literally did a 180 and was protecting these birds. And so I see this almost as like a redemption story, or when we talk about repentance, the Greek word is metanoia. It means a turning around. And so I see him living that out in many ways. And his life becomes a resurrection of sorts, where he was taking life, he turns to protecting life. And I think there's lots of ways to go with that. But I just ended with him because he was protecting egrets. And then there's this egret in flight. And then I end with this bird. Oh, what happened there? Bird bark or cry. And I want you to hear neither. These computers are old and slow. Wow. I'm pulling it up. Have any of y'all heard of egret? Alright, get ready to live.
That's catalog number 134193.
Not wild?
The word bark.
It's easy to see how they come from dinosaurs, right?
It's so deep.
Yeah, it's very just like.
Just do that.
Do
they just do that sort of line or
Margaret and then Catherine.
Sorry.
No, y'all were just saying that I couldn't hear both of you at the same time.
Do they make that sound just while flying or to gather together with people or?
They have different calls. That one they do all the time. I don't know like what the point or purpose of it is.
Clearing their throat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was basically gonna ask the same thing too, if it was just random or a mating call or whatever.
Yeah.
They have mating calls, but that's not it. That's just like one of their noises.
So Will, when you were at the Publix and you were parking your car next to the egret, was it making that?
No. No, you know, a lot of times they make them when they're like taking off and flying or when they're landing. I don't know if it's like they're announcing they're there.
Maybe that.
I would have to research this. I don't know, but I do know like a lot of times when you hear it, they're landing or they're in flight.
Maybe it's.
Heron does that.
What's that?
The blue herons.
Yeah, and sandhill cranes have weird ones too. It's kind of.
Does that, you hear that sound, does that increase your spirituality just by hearing it?
Well,
I know for me, when you hear the call of a loon.
Yeah, I bet. That's one of the most amazing sounds of all nature.
It is.
You know, it just brings you right back to being outdoors. And
Yeah. Yeah, for me, when I hear the egret, it's like seeing that stone fossil. It's like you just know that there's something deep and historic that reaches back millions of years in this bird. It's just like, but that I think that's what the essay is about. Is like everything opens beyond itself if we allow it to. And so I can go see a stone in a museum, or I can go see this fossil that literally connects one time period and to another, one part of evolution to another, one part of moving through the world to another. And it's just like we have to train ourselves to be open and aware to these things. It's crazy. I had one last poem, and I'm kind of going backward with it. But this is Phileas Moss's There Will Be Animals. And this is a playful but also serious, and I think it ties into what I ended with, and so I wanted to read it now. There will be animals to teach us what we can't teach ourselves. There will be a baboon who is neither stupid nor clumsy, as he paints his mangled face for the war being waged against his jungle. There will be egrets in a few thousand years who will have evolved without plumes, so we cannot take them. There will be ewes giving their wool, compensating for we lack in humility. There will be macaws with short arched bills that stay short because they talk without telling lies. Mackerel will continue to appear near Cape Hatteras each spring and swim north into Canadian waters so there can be continuity. There will be penguins keeping alive Hollywood's golden era. The shackle cock will continue to outdistance man, twisting and turning on a path unconcerned with shortcuts. Coffin fly done will leave the Shawshene River, heading for the lights of Lawrence. What they see in 48 hours makes them adults who will fast for the rest of their short lives, mating once during the next hour and understanding everything as they drop into a communal grave 3 feet thick with family reaching the same conclusions. The coast horn lizard still won't be found without agatrix. It will inflate and the first of 6 million Jewfish will emerge from its mouth. We will all be richer. John Dory will replace John Doe, so the nameless among us will have Peter's thumb mark on their cheek, and the coin the saint pulled from their mouths and their pockets. Then once and for all, we will know it is no illusion. The lion lying with the lamb, the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood, walking out of a wolf named the Shao. Wow. I think this poem obviously speaks to a lot of things, but I think it speaks to... No, she's African-American author.
Speaks to what?
I think it speaks to this connection we have to nature, whether we want it or not. And we bear responsibility toward it, we see from the very beginning in Genesis. And like Stephanie was saying that kingfishers and dragonflies just do their thing. Humans have choices. God has invested us with free will. And that free will entails responsibility. And so that's ours to work out and figure out. And we are so deeply interconnected with this world, whether we feel like it or not. It's really interesting if you read Psalm 104, which is a creation psalm. It talks about all the animals and God's providence and sustenance. And then at the very end, one of the very last lines talks about the wicked. The only thing wicked in that whole poem is humanity. And that wickedness is the opposite side of the responsibility, the love that God has given us, right? And I think that's something we need to think about all the time, is that God invests us with a responsibility for our communities and for the world we live in. And we don't have to do that, but that's what God calls us to. And I think that poem and ending with that and that Guy Bradley kind of ties that together. Any last minute question?
Can you explain the last things like that? John Dory?
John Dory is a fish.
Oh, okay.
And it has a black mark on its in the middle of it. And they say it's St. Peter's thumb mark. I don't know the story behind that, but they said that it's literally, if you look it up online, there's just this little black mark on it. So
so John Dory also placed the fish, or
I don't know. I've heard of it as John Dory. Supposedly it's a very ugly fish, but it's supposedly very good.
It's like soul.
Yeah, soul. Yeah. Okay, so
the other thing it sort of speaks to me is shows you how much God loves everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have a tendency as human beings to think that we're supreme. God loves us. Obviously, God does, but God loves the smallest.
Yeah.
And to
that's what
to create things that are so incredibly beautiful.
That's what Job 38 through 40 is about. God just names all these animals that Job couldn't care less about.
Yeah.
God speaking from the world and says how much God cares about all these animals, and every single one of them is undomesticated. And that's the point, that these animals that have no utilization to you are important, even if they just seem, flagrant or pointless.
It can be so disheartening in the present world now about the way we take it for granted and destroy it.
Yeah.
God said it was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think all of these things just point us to the I think we always have a tendency to get down or hopeless or almost like serious in a negative way. And I think all this points us to is possibility, beauty, the joy, the gratefulness we should have. And that should inspire us to do that work and not fall into like cynicism or despair, because that's always a temptation.
Yeah,
I've
despaired plenty. I know all about that.
So on page 100, when you're talking about Lord Northbourne,
yeah,
and Northbourne questioned the prevailing industrial mentality and drew attention to the growing reductionism of the scientific outlook, which privileged the empirical. In fact, it is much more how we see things than what we see. What you're missing, what you're regretting is we so often lose the mystery
Yes.
because we're looking at the empirical facts.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we kind of poo-poo on biblical literalism, and how kind of myopic it can be, taking everything literally and not seeing the beauty and depth and poetry of scripture. But I think science does the same thing. It just turns everything into this kind of materialism, and everything's almost like a mechanism, and it doesn't see the beauty and wonder of life. And so we have to protect ourselves from literalism in all areas, and that's what I think Northwood speaks to. Yeah. It's 11 o'clock, so I'm going to close this in prayer. I'm happy to stick around, but I know some people might want to get out of here. Let's pray. Gracious, holy, loving God, we give you thanks for this day, for this church, and for this book study, and just the chance to meet with each other over the summer and talk and discuss all these wonderful things. We give you thanks for your creation and the way that it speaks to us and reveals your love, fills us with wonder, and the way that it pushes us to go beyond our own concerns and wants and desires. We ask that you can open us to the ways that we can encounter you and strangers, nature and animals, and make us just inspired with awe and wonder and gratitude, but also responsibility to care for the things that you have put before us, whether that be a friend, a family member, or a stranger, or just a landscape that we love. We ask all these things in your Son, Jesus Christ, in whom all things hold together. Amen. Amen. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for sharing.
Jim Corbett.
Oh,
Was he like Bradley?
Jim Corbett is a really interesting figure.
I do believe him.
Jim Corbett was a Quaker that herded goats, and he actually, being a Quaker, got really involved in taking care of migrants coming over the border. And so he was a pretty radical figure back in like the 60s and 70s, and was really good friends with a Presbyterian pastor named John Fife, who's still around, who
he was down in Phoenix, right?
Yeah, they basically housed and cared for folks migrating through the desert. And I know immigration is a very contentious topic, but they were not trying to justify or their concern wasn't policy. Their concern was there was humans going through a desert, and they took care of them. But Corbett was a Quaker, and he raised goats, and he wrote this book called Goat Walking. And it is the weirdest book you'll ever read. It's like animal husbandry, biblical exegesis, and like prophetic Christianity wrapped up. So you're reading about milking goats one section, and then he's like exegeting a passage in Genesis the next. And then he'll just start talking about like what we're supposed to do in 20th century America. It's so weird.
Do you recommend it? You recommend it?
Oh yeah. If you're interested in weird books, yes.
So I Googled Jim Corbett, and what came up, he was an Anglo Indian big game hunter. And he hunted tigers that were killing people.
That is another Jim Corbett. And he has a book called Hunter, right?